We are pleased to have an address from the University of Wyoming's president, the 28th President Ed Seidel. He's a distinguished scholar who's led academic research and innovation programs at multiple universities and really across the world, in Moscow and Germany, all across North America. His career is astonishing and has served as the director of the National Center for Supercomputing Applications, and also as the assistant director for the National Science Foundation. In his career, he's built and supported multi-billion-dollar programs. They've engaged the university system, the public, as well as the private sector. And in doing so, he's successfully strengthened the link among higher education, research, and business to stimulate economic development and then ultimately fostering innovation. So without further delay, please welcome University of Wyoming President Ed Seidel.
We have organized, I think, a very good group here to talk about the impact of computing very, very broadly. And in the presentation we just heard, we already caught a glimpse into how the computing world is no longer just the computing world. It's fundamentally and rapidly impacting everything we do in our lives, including every market, from art to agriculture to medicine to finance to biology itself, with DNA as a sort of a new coding paradigm. So the point is, it is everywhere. It is profound, and we are thinking very deeply about how to create the educational system we need in order to not only take advantage of that, but to prepare for that going forward in the future. So we've assembled a group here, and our idea would be that we're going to have a conversation. Several of us are going to make some remarks, and we're going to have a bit of a conversation before we go into the panel. And I will start by saying we have three panelists. Among them is myself, also someone I'm very, very pleased to see on the screen here, a friend of mine, Panch, as we know him, Dr. Panch, or perhaps if you really want, Sethuraman Panchanathan, who is the director of the National Science Foundation. I'm sure everyone's familiar with the National Science Foundation. It is the primary steward of the national scientific capability at the level of the entire nation. It is the gold standard for scientific funding and peer review around the world. It has about an $8.5 billion annual budget. Hopefully, with some work going on in Congress right now, that might actually double in the next year or so. So we're very excited about that. But Panch is then not only himself a distinguished computer scientist, but in this role is appointed by the President of the United States, also then confirmed in this case, as often it is for National Science Foundation Director, unanimously by the Senate. He's been a leader in education and in innovation for decades. Most recently, Panch was the, I don't know the exact title here, Executive Vice President for Research and Innovation at Arizona State University, Chief Innovation Officer, founder of the Center for Cognitive Ubiquitous Computing at Arizona State. And under his leadership, Arizona State increased its funding fivefold. And so that's just an example. Hopefully you can do the same thing for the National Science Foundation, Panch. So I'd like to turn it over to you for some remarks. And then I will introduce in a minute Joe Schaffer, who is with us as well, who's the president of Laramie County Community College. And we'll have a good conversation. So on to you, Panch.
Thank you so much, Ed. And thank you for inviting me to this amazing event that you've put together. Because this is very resonant. I mean, this is not surprise. That would come from your leadership, Ed, because as was read, in your bio, you have pretty much spanned the spectrum of what it takes in order for us to be, putting things like this to inspire more talent, more ideas, more impact. All of these things are things that I'm so glad you're doing this, Ed, and that's why I really wanted to be part of this event. And what I want to tell you is, you started talking about computing forward and future forward and computing. And you and I both know, because we come from the same, we cut from the same piece of cloth, if you want to look at it that way. We believe that computing is not only a discipline, but it is the fabric of everything. You just mentioned that. Fabric of everything that happens in society today, and that will be the way it will be into the future. And in order to do that, therefore, the computing mindset is something that we need inculcated or exposed to or inspired into as early as even the kindergarten, for example. So how do we get the computing mindset evolving through K-12 and then into the university and beyond? And whatever discipline you pursue, whether it is social behavioral sciences, or whether it is business, or whether it is history or linguistics, it doesn't matter. Computing essentially enriches the disciplinary science, and the disciplinary science in turn challenges computing sciences in order that we might come up with more innovations. So all of this is towards what? Only two things that come out of this: that we will tackle societal problems that we are confronted with every day. I mean, we are in the midst of the pandemic. Clearly, computing has been a huge part of trying to find solutions, but also solutions at speed and at scale. Likewise, if you look at climate, climate is not just an engineering problem or a geo problem or a bio problem or a math problem or a physics problem. It's all of the above, with computing being at the core of it all. And I'm so delighted that at Wyoming, for example, you have the Cheyenne supercomputing facility of NCAR's supercomputing efforts there, and that you're all contributing significantly towards this objective of how do we combat things like climate change, global challenge problems like climate change. So NSF is very ready to engage, as you said rightly, not only today, but also ensuring that we are creating these economic development ecosystems of tremendous vibrancy in places like Wyoming. I come from Arizona, as you said. So in states like Wyoming, Arizona, Ed, you know this, and I'm sure the people that are listening to this know this, that these states have much to offer, and there is yet to be tapped that kind of talent and ideas. And we have to make possible every talent that is everywhere in our nation should be given the opportunity to express itself. And every place in this nation should be given the opportunity to be able to take that unbelievable talent and ideas and translate it into economic development ecosystems and ensuring societal progress. So I'm very excited, and I'm very keen to play a part in working with you, Ed, and other leaders across the nation, and see how we can unleash this prosperity in our nation. This is the time, and we need to get it done very soon. So thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Panchanathan. So I'll make a few remarks now about some things we're doing here in Wyoming, and then we'll turn it over to Joe. And then I think we can just have a conversation for probably about the last 15 minutes of this about how we're doing in this endeavor. So thanks, Panch, so much. What you talked about is extremely exciting to me, and I think to all of us here in Wyoming. And one theme that we might want to talk about a little bit later is the point you made about everyone needs to be able to participate in this. And so now that I've moved to a rural state, we're organizing ourselves around not only the state of Wyoming, but in the entire region. In fact, tomorrow I'm going to Bozeman, Montana, as we work with the universities in the entire region of the rural Mountain West EPSCoR region, where we talk about how we prepare ourselves in exactly the same way. But I'll start here at the University of Wyoming. So we have started in the last year to envision not only growing computing in traditional areas in computer science and electrical and computer engineering, or around the NCAR Wyoming supercomputing facility, where we do primarily simulation and modeling, largely in the geosciences, atmospheric sciences, but how to make this a much broader attack, not only at the university, but across the entire state. So we have proposed a school of computing at the university that will be broad-based and potentially involving every unit on the university campus here that would like to be involved. We're looking to build joint appointments with departments as broad as art to agriculture, biology, plant science, agriculture, as I said, the law school, the traditional areas in simulation and modeling and astrophysics, or you name it. Every part of the university can participate in this. And the idea would be it's an investment in the entire university, not just in a computing department of some kind. And so we have proposed this. The Board of Trustees will be deciding on this in the November timeframe, but we've had strong and good feedback on this. And so we're also talking about growing our capacity to have much deeper partnerships with the corporate sector, and not just at the university, but also at the entire state level. And I'll come to this in a minute when we talk with Joe Schaffer from Laramie County Community College. So this is in development right now, but combined with this, we're also looking at building a university-wide Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation that would be in some sense like a 1-2 punch for building the state's economy. And we think about this in two ways: existing economies, that the state has been traditionally powered by, whether it's extraction and energy or agriculture or hospitality and tourism. Those are major sectors of the current Wyoming economy, or the future economy that will be surely more IT based, more based on developments, as we just heard, in blockchain or the smart contracts, as it also it applies to every area of our economy in the state of Wyoming. And of course, entrepreneurship, creating new businesses. We have something like 70% of our graduates of the state of the University of Wyoming leave the state. We have to be extra hardworking on creating opportunities in the state. That means corporate partnerships and entrepreneurship, both to bring companies here and to create new companies within the state. We can't do it alone. At the University of Wyoming, as ambitious as we might be, we have about 12 to 13,000 students here, but the state has in total about 35,000 students if you think about all the community colleges. So we have a unique opportunity, and I hope it really becomes a national model where we can align all of higher education in the state and then work with schools and companies. So we build a pipeline that goes all the way from elementary schools through to the community colleges with the University of Wyoming, and then with companies, and to create a partnership that is like no other in the country. And that is what we're aiming to do. So we have created that includes all the 7 community colleges, soon to be 8 in the state, and the University of Wyoming. And we have been working very, very hard for the last year to put together not just how do you transfer from a community college to the university. We've worked on that too, but we've worked more on what are the new programmatic things we can do that impact specific market sectors in the state of Wyoming that will prepare us both for the workforce of the future as well as for the state. And to speak to any of that as you would like, Joe, I'd like to introduce our colleague and my friend, Joe Schaffer, who's the president of Laramie County Community College. Joe, when I first met you virtually, probably by Zoom before I moved here when I was still in Champaign-Urbana, we had a great conversation about particularly the computing and the entrepreneurship agenda that we have, and we have many other areas of common interest here. So it'd be great to hear from you, your thoughts about what we're doing across the state and with the Laramie County Community College.
Thank you, Ed, and good morning, everyone. It's great to join. I would tell you I have 2 regrets about this morning. One is not being there with you in person, and I apologize for that. My other regret is I don't have a cool name like Ponch. And I think I need that type of name to really fit in the computing world. So Joe really doesn't do it, but I appreciate that you've opened the door and invited me to share some comments. You know, the first thing that I'd just say in Wyoming, and hopefully other states will start to follow this lead, I think we're blessed to have a relationship between the 2- and 4-year sectors that many states don't have. In fact, in many states, it seems like that is still an adversarial relationship and a competitive one that unfortunately puts our students really at the intersection of that competition or strife. Here in Wyoming, I think between the community colleges and the university, there's just this deep, strong, committed willingness to find new ways to help build the state from an economic perspective, from a societal perspective, and hopefully from a knowledge generation and acquisition perspective as well. So I wanted to share that, Ned. I just want to say publicly, I appreciate your leadership and willingness to open those doors. As you can imagine, I'm a community college evangelist and believe strongly in the role that this sector plays now and will in the future. Across the U.S., there's roughly 8 million students enrolled in credit-bearing programs at its community colleges. Here in Wyoming, 2 out of every 3 enrollments in higher education start at a community college. 53% of all first-generation students are enrolled at public 2-year colleges. So we think about the future of our state, of our regions, really of our nation. We have to think about the pipeline of talent and individuals and where they're going to come from. And yet, while we commit to and understand and know that post-secondary education is going to be one of the primary motivators for individual and, I would say, societal success, economically, socially, with that, we know that the number one influence on whether or not a student will pursue post-secondary education is what their families did. And so you take that into context and think about the world of computing. One of our biggest challenges is getting young folks to understand the impact that computing has on economic opportunity, career opportunity, in every aspect of our life. As we heard the good director of NSF say, it intersects everywhere. And yet we do a very, very poor job, I think, of exposing students, exposing young people to the world of computing early on in their educational journey. And when you combine that with the number of first generation students that will likely be our future workforce, their perspective on what careers really are so limited by their families' past careers or what we provide for them that we're not opening the doors the way we need to from a career exploration and truly understanding computing education. I think we're clouded by the .com era and the traditional Microsoft Office specialist era that still clouds many parents and many families' perspective. And so I share that because I think this is one of the things we have to do better when we start talking about computing as a career, computing as a vocation, computing as a discipline. We have to expose individuals far more broadly, and that takes educational partnership. So I hearken back to the days when we talked a lot about writing across the curriculum, especially in K-12, and we need to embrace the concept of computing across the curriculum. And as you know, and have probably heard, Wyoming is one of the first states to actually adopt computational science standards across our curricular expectations for the outcomes. We're moving in the right direction, and these conversations and this partnership helps us move a little bit closer. The last thing that I just share is that I'm a fan and a deep believer in rural America. And if you're tracking what's happening in rural America versus the urban center, we're at this crossroads where economic opportunity, social mobility, job growth, job creation, investment has been fairly isolated to major metropolitan areas. And rural America, really that was the backbone of our country in many ways. The bedrock of the middle class has been shrinking. But we have an opportunity, good, bad, or indifferent. Much of the social unrest we're seeing in major metropolitan areas, much of the environmental issues we're seeing in major metropolitan areas on our West Coast, and honestly, much of the impact of population as a result of the pandemic is shifting focus now to rural America. And so people are thinking, where do we move to? Companies are thinking, where do we relocate? Where do we expand? And we know today, more than anything, that will be driven by talent. Where individuals exist, where talent exists, we will see economies happen, economies grow. And so I think about the opportunity we now have to capture that interest and growth, to capture the opportunity to grow computational science from an economic perspective here in rural Wyoming. It's going to take people that are committed to this and people that are engaged in it. And it's why we have to start from an educational perspective. So I'll stop there, Ed, and just say I'm happy to answer any questions or stay engaged. I just appreciate the opportunity for this deep partnership across the educational spectrum.
Thanks a lot, Joe. So as I understand, we have about 10 minutes maybe just to continue the conversation, and maybe I'll just start, I'll turn it back to Punch in a second here, but I wanted to add a point. That is, in the last year, we have worked very hard with the community colleges and with our partner Cardiff University in the UK to begin to address some of the digital literacy issues that we're talking about. We're imagining positioning our proposed School of Computing as one not just for the University of Wyoming, but one that works with all the community colleges and with schools here to really raise digital literacy across the entire state. The first thing out of the gate we have in partnership with Cardiff University is our software boot camp that we hope turns into a statewide coding infrastructure. And just back to Frederick's talk a few minutes ago, he was talking about we need to have both the generalist in technology, and maybe the business applications, and the alchemist, as he called them, in the coding. And so we're looking to try to build up both of those here, and then to make sure that we have the offerings and the skill sets to really work with companies. An important part of this would be a company, a corporate partnership program. And I'm curious, Panch, if you have any thoughts about at the national level what you see, and with the new technology director proposed at NSF, for example, are there ways that we might see more activity like this supported from the federal level?
Absolutely, Ed. I mean, so first of all, let me tell you, congratulations to you and the University of Wyoming for thinking about the School of Computing, which is a very important step that we need to take. If we want prosperity, I mean, I love what Joe said. I mean, the fact that we have to ensure that we have, tremendous talent and ideas everywhere. And if you believe in that rural areas should have as much opportunity, if not more, in order to be able to exercise their ideas and talent. And it is our responsibility to ensure that we make sure that we give them the opportunities. Let's take this moment that we're all in, which is the COVID moment. It has shown us something very interesting. that through digital means that we can reach anywhere, anyone, and have high learning outcomes. Okay, so which means that we cannot leave anybody behind. So it has taught us. I mean, yes, we switched into this in a pivoted in a 2-week time frame, whatever it is. We all struggled with various things, technology and others, but finally we are here. We are able to now reach people everywhere, which means that we should be able to train people everywhere. So to your core question, prosperity has to be everywhere. In fact, last week I was in Oklahoma and Kansas, and I visited Johnson Community College in Kansas. I was blown away by this quality of students and the kind of projects that they were doing. I mean, I tell you, I mean, I was just, it's just mind-boggling. I hope people will go out and actually interact with students and see this unbelievable talent that is everywhere. So I'm taking those things, coming back here and looking at what we can do at K-12 level, at community college level, and other pathways and the research universities to see how we can build this tremendous ecosystems of prosperity and economic, of course. And to your question about the technology directorate, that is the purpose of the technology directorate, is how might we launch, Ed, and I look forward to working with you and all the Joe and others to see how we might launch these kinds of prosperous environments everywhere. And we have to pick and choose, of course, what might be the most appropriate for each state or each region, so that we might have these unbelievable ecosystems across the nation. You know, I always talk about this as the Bell Labs of the past. That is through public-private partnership. You know, can we come up with some really, really innovative places that this nation, I think, has got so much talent and ideas. And if we want to be globally competitive, and at this moment, we need to do a lot more. And NSF is fully committed through its technology directorate, but also the what I call the established NSF is also going to be, you know, I call it the strengthening at speed and scale, scaling rapidly in terms of seeing how we can get more and more talent inspired by co-investments, by partnerships. And I'm so glad you mentioned the industry partnerships. I'm looking at every form of partnership, interagency, industry, foundations, whatever it takes. Of course, K-12 community college systems and the universities, so that we can really realize this. And the time is now, and speed is of essence. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Punch. If I could maybe turn it back to Joe, then if you wanted to comment a little further. One thing I really like the theme that we're kind of talking about a little bit here, which is rural America and the importance of not only educating, but providing access, particularly for the younger generation that are going to become the next generation of leaders. And in fact, kids entering, well, maybe to preview my question, there's some studies by McKinsey that point out that by 2030, most markets are going to be completely disrupted by artificial intelligence, robotics, automation, big data, and such things. And so you think about, well, that's a long time away, but actually kids who are entering high school this year are going to be graduating from college in 2030. And so we have to start absolutely now in educating and making sure that kids are seeing these areas as relevant and also accessible to them. And maybe talk a little bit, Joe, how we can build those partnerships, particularly at the high school levels with the community colleges and the university, how we build that pipeline out.
That's a great question. That same series of studies, and I think their seminal study really also pointed out that the vast majority of automation in the job place is going to occur in rural America, and so that's a pressure that we now have to focus on, especially knowing that rural America has always been sort of propped up by those strong employers, the large community-based employers in the extractive industry and the manufacturing industry. Those worlds are changing, and so as a result, the opportunity for individuals in rural America seem to actually be shrinking as a result of that trajectory. And so in some ways, higher education and education now becomes the intermediary between the people that are either in rural America now or really anywhere in the United States and will be coming back, and the opportunities that are represented by businesses, those that are emerging and those that are already here. And so it's incumbent upon us to really rethink that role we play as an intermediary. And this is what I find fascinating, just to the good director's point. We now have the opportunity to educate, but also employ individuals anywhere in this world, including rural America. Yes, we have broadband hurdles. Yes, we have some of those societal hurdles we need to get through. But the reality is that computing as a field, and more importantly, computing as an occupational choice, actually can be mobile anywhere now. And so we have to do basically two things. We have to help young people understand the world of that exists for them if they pursue a job in computing, a career in computing, a vocation. But at the same time, we have to connect that pipeline to employers and start encouraging what we're already seeing out of the Silicon Valley. In other words, to find other places to hire your workforce, house your workforce, and do the work that you do because of the digital and virtual nature which we can now accomplish much of our work. And so that's why in rural America, specifically here in Wyoming, we have to think of ourselves as a catalyst, as an intermediary that connects that pipeline of talent to the economic opportunities that are existed by businesses and bring them together. And if we can do that, we should be able to accomplish a redistribution of economic opportunity and really wealth and prosperity across the US, and not have it only isolated in those major metropolitan areas.
Thanks. And that's precisely why we're trying to build these collaborations across the state. First of all, to build a critical mass in the state of Wyoming to begin to address this, but then likewise with our partners, particularly to the north of us, the Dakotas, Montana, and Idaho. And that's the topic of the conversation we'll be having in the next couple of days up in Bozeman, is how do we organize ourselves as coherently as possible across this region, because we don't have an urban center. And of course, so I think we, in the rural states, we don't want to be seen as decoration on an urban center. We want to have a region in our own right with our own problems and so on, create that critical mass that we can collect across the region. And now that we're so well connected by digital technologies, that's possible. But I'm curious to know if our friend Panch has any comments about how to operationalize that.
So I think, the first thing, of course, Ed, in all of this is having the conversation so that we can all converge in those areas that we all agree that is important for that region and where we can excel, right? At the end of the day, we can do everything everywhere. That's true. But then finding that niche set of areas that is more akin to what takes full advantage of the assets of that local region is extremely valuable. So I think, Ed, again, I congratulate you on that, because you've already formed the alliances with all the Mountain West states. The other day, I addressed the chancellors. Thanks for inviting me there. And it is that kind of a thing of coming together, and this discussion you were saying you're going to have in Bozeman is the kind of conversations that you're having with K-12 systems, with community college systems, with university systems, because at the end of the day, they all need to come together to say, yes, this is something that we think as a region that we can be world-class in, and nobody can compete with this in this area. So, and then a place like NSF will absolutely invest to make sure that we are building that ecosystem into a very prosperous environment. And I think this is the time for us to do that, because I think to Joe's point earlier, we cannot live with this prosperity being limited to a few states or a few regions or the east or the west. I mean, as important as they are, and we can strengthen them, scale them, but we really need to birth prosperity everywhere if we really aspire to want this nation to be in the vanguard of innovation for centuries to come. So I think that's why there is, Ed, to your earlier point when you introduced me, that's why there is so much interest in Washington right now, because they recognize the importance of this. They recognize the importance of prosperity everywhere. The EPSCoR program. In fact, the other day I was with Senator Moran in Kansas, as well as with Congressman Lucas, Ranking Member Lucas in Oklahoma. And absolutely, EPSCoR is a fantastic program, and it should be enriched. Make sure that all the states get fully into the cake, and then take as much as you can, and because that's what's going to make this prosperous everywhere. So thank you, and I look forward to Wyoming and the region being highly successful, and you can count on NSF working with you all to make sure that we are part of creating the solutions that you're trying to create and the prosperity that you're trying to create.
Thank you, Panch, and thank you, Joe. Panch, we'll have you out here as soon as a visit. We're already thinking about that. Maybe I need to turn it back to Cheryl. I see our chairperson is standing at the podium, so thank you very much.
So you're right on time, President Seidel, so no worries. Yes, great conversation.